With the recent reveal of Streets of Rage 4, I thought it was about time I took a quick look back on my favourite beat 'em up series of all time. Few beat 'em ups are looked back on as fondly as the first three Streets of Rage games. Yeah, sure, these games are great fun to play, had wonderful visuals, and featured amazing boss fights. But we all know the main reason these games are so beloved.
そういうのをゲームミュージックで再現できる。
First things first though, I want to quickly discuss why this series was even created by Sega in the first place. From what I can dig up, I don't believe Sega ever originally intended to create another first-party beat-em-up series for their then-home console, the Sega Mega Drive. I mean, Sega already had the Golden Axe series, which was enjoying massive success all around the world. Apparently, the decision to create Streets of Rage was only made after Capcom decided to release the first three Final Fight games exclusively on the Super Nintendo. The Final Fight games being exclusive to the SNES was a huge win for Nintendo, and Sega felt they needed to compete, and I'm so glad they did. In my honest opinion, all three Streets of Rage games are far more enjoyable experiences than any of the Final Fight games. Don't get me wrong, I still love the Final Fight series, especially the first game, but I do believe the Streets of Rage games have far deeper combat mechanics, a more diverse enemy lineup, more interesting locales, and some of the best No, not yet. Anyways, it's about time I started talking about each of these games individually.
The largest and hottest library of 16-bit games plays on Sega Genesis, featuring Streets of Rage, the fighting game that'll knock your socks off, with 40 individually controllable attack moves, and a neighborhood crawling with punks, muggers, and urban slime. Streets of Rage, only on the 16-bit Genesis system from Sega.
The original Streets of Rage was released in 1991. As previously mentioned, it was created in order to compete with Capcom's Final Fight. The game takes place in an unknown city, which has been overrun by a crime syndicate. Three ex-cops decide it's time to take back the city. So yeah, the plot isn't that deep, but you don't play a Streets of Rage game for the plot. The game allows you to play as one of three characters: Axel Stone, Adam Hunter, or Blaze Fielding. Blaze is the character I always play as. She's a good combination of speed and power. But all three characters have very similar stats, so you won't be at a major disadvantage for picking one character over the other. The actual gameplay in the original Streets of Rage is admittedly rather simplistic. You only have a single attack button, a jump button, and a button that calls the cops to clear away all enemies on screen. You can perform a back attack by pressing the attack and jump buttons at the same time, and you can also attack in mid-air. There really aren't any complex combos in the game, or difficult movesets. The game's depth lies more in managing big groups of enemies and learning enemy attack patterns. For example, you can grab an enemy and throw him or her into another group of enemies to give yourself some breathing room. You can throw enemies off elevators, and if you're playing co-op you can even perform some special moves you can't perform in single player. The bosses are a bit of a disappointment, to be honest. They're either way too easy or unfairly difficult. They're basically complete trial and error until you figure out their attack patterns. It might sound like I have a lot of complaints with this game, but there is still so much to love. The visuals are beautiful and the environments really give me that 90s vibe. I'm in love with this game's aesthetic. It can be great fun beating the crap out of everything in this game, especially in co-op. The attacks feel really impactful and satisfying, which is really important in a beat 'em up. But okay, I've put this off long enough. It's time to talk about the real reason this game is still considered a classic, even today. And all I have to say is two words: Yuzo Koshiro. This guy. Just listen. To say the music in this game is good would be a massive understatement. To say the music in this game is amazing would also be selling it short. This is one of the best soundtracks in gaming history, period. It's incredibly catchy. It has this energy to it that's perfect for a fast-paced beat 'em up like this. There's not a single track I dislike, and I'm certain that if you played this music in a club today, people would still dance to it. It was that far ahead of its time. The only composer that can outdo Yuzo Koshiro is Yuzo Koshiro himself, and the following year, he did just that.
Young Bobby Engels has a problem. He needs to earn the respect of his peers. So he gets the special Sega Genesis fighting system. It comes with Streets of Rage 2. He saves $40. He gets more moves. He gets more control. Now things are pretty much okay.
I said chocolate chip.
Streets of Rage 2 was released in North America in 1992 and improved on its predecessor in every possible way. There were more moves, more combos, more enemy variety, more diverse locations, more bosses, more everything. The visuals were a huge leap over the original game. I think I can safely say that Streets of Rage 2 is easily one of the best looking games on the Mega Drive. The sprites were massive and there was an overall higher level of detail in the environments. It's still a great looking game, even today. The gameplay also saw a huge level of improvement over the original. No longer do you only have one attack button to work with. Each character now has 2 special attacks, alongside their standard punch and kicks. These attacks cost only a small amount of health, but they are so devastating when used correctly, that the risk is completely worth it. Each character also has a special attack that doesn't drain any health, but is a bit trickier to pull off. When you combine all these attacks along with the standard grabs, aerial attacks and throws, you begin to realise that Streets of Rage 2 has an almost ludicrous amount of depth for a beat 'em up. There are also more characters to choose from in Streets of Rage 2. Axel and Blaze return of course, but they are now joined by 2 newcomers, Max Thunder and Eddie Hunter, otherwise known as Skate. Adam is unfortunately not playable this time around, since he's been caught by the antagonist of the series, Mr. X. The 2 new characters are a good substitute though. Skate is a lot of fun to play as. He is incredibly fast and agile, which makes him excellent at evading enemy attacks. The only major downside of playing with Skate is his lack of strength. Taking out enemies can take longer than usual with Skate, which can slow the game's pace into a crawl at times. On the other hand, you have Max Thunder, who tears shit apart. He's super powerful, but he's also a little bit too slow to maneuver for my liking. I know Max is a lot of people's favourite character, but he just wasn't for me. Again, I prefer to play as Blaze, as she's the most well-rounded character in the game. Yuzo Koshiro returned to compose the soundtrack, and oh boy did he ever outdo himself with this game. The music in Streets of Rage 2 was a cut above anything featured in the previous game. There are a few reasons for this. One reason is that there's more complexity to the compositions in this game. The music doesn't seem to loop as frequently as in the original. They feel more like complete songs. Another reason that rarely gets mentioned is the fact that Yuzo asked his good friend Motohiro Kasashima to help him with the game's soundtrack. The 2 of them were a match made in heaven, and Streets of Rage 2 would go on to have my favourite soundtrack in the entire series, and possibly my favourite soundtrack in any game ever. That was my video on why I feel the first 2 Streets of Rage games redefined the beat 'em up genre. Streets of Rage 3 is also a great game, and I may talk about it in future, so I hope you look forward to that, and thank you for watching.